Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Freight Fraud Summit live here on the Storytelling Chronicles. I'm here with my co-host, Dale Prax from FreightValidate. We're about to have a really good conversation on four main topics today. We're going to talk about safety, fraud, theft, double brokering, and of course, unethical practices. And everything, as you well know, starts from the shipper. That's when fraud starts. And then we'll get more into this. So, Dale, what are your thoughts on today's show?
Yeah, I think it's really important to bring like-minded folks together. I've been saying this since the day I started FreightValidate, that we need to stop fighting each other and start fighting the problem. And I think this is a good way to start doing that. Let's involve the shippers and the brokers and the carriers, other industry stakeholders, factoring companies, insurance companies. Let's get us together and really start fighting the problem and finding ways to fix it. You know, if anyone thinks we can depend on the U.S. government to fix it, they're sorely mistaken. So we have started taking matters in our own hands, and we're going to need help to do that. And putting folks like this together will do that. I'm 100% confident that we'll make a difference.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what? Let's bring in our panelists now. Bill. How you doing, Bill?
Good afternoon. How are you?
We are good. For those who don't know who Bill Robbins is just tell everybody about who you are and what you do.
I've been around the freight business for roughly about 20 some odd years now at this point. I've had the pleasure of doing fuel, working with asset companies, logistics companies, freight forwarders. So I've done a little bit of first, middle mile, and final mile. The last couple of years, a lot of people on LinkedIn do know me because of the fact I've been vocal about, COIs, cargo theft, double brokering. And that's when I first met you and Dale in a much closer manner about 2 years ago, and same with a few of the other panelists.
Yeah, thanks. Let me bring in our next guest. Claudia, how are you? Introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm well, thank you. Thanks for having me on. My name is Claudia Catlett. I work for the Decker family. We have a brokerage, a transportation brokerage, as well as an asset side. So I kind of get to see both sides of the coin when it comes to those things. So I think I have a little bit of a unique perspective in some of that to provide here. As I got involved on LinkedIn and talking about double brokering and fraud and this thing. So this is how we all met, and love it, and happy to contribute to what we can to try to fight this in the industry.
I appreciate you joining us. And next is John Cantera. John, how you doing, buddy?
Howdy, folks. Double broker bounty hunter in the house. How y'all doing?
We are doing well. For those who don't know who John is, tell everybody who you are.
I am the double broker bounty hunter. I am the host of the Stop the Scam podcast, available every Monday afternoon, 5 p.m. Central. Check out my YouTube. And I'm a contract dispatcher who has been an active fraud fighter for the last several years.
Awesome. And our next guest, Joe, how are you, sir?
Just fine. And yourself?
I am doing well. Thanks for joining us today. For those who don't know who Drew is, tell everybody who you
are. Drew Wilder with Vicarious Liability Risk Management. We handle cargo claims, COI compliance, and so forth. Like Bill and Dale, been around a while, and yourself as well, Jeff. Been around a while, and Claudia. Started in trucking about a little over 25 years ago. Worked on the dock, operations, dispatch, safety director, and so forth. So kind of, had my hands in a lot of different areas. Worked for a motor carrier that actually operated as a freight forwarder, freight broker, over-the-road domestic motor carrier. So being on the compliance side at that particular time, had a lot of different umbrellas to manage as far as liability goes.
Thank you. And our next guest, hey, Jenny, how are you?
Hey, how's everyone doing today? My name is, a lot of people know me as Jenny in a Bottle from X or from Discord. I'm transportation collections, but I also fight fraud. I've been doing that for several years. Comes with the territory. I was also a driver myself, a dispatcher for a brokerage, and I've been a logistics coordinator for a Fortune 500 company. So my background is strong in transportation.
Awesome. Awesome. And for those who don't know who Jeff Dickinson is, AKA the Bodacious Cowboy, I've been in the industry for 45 years. And over those 45 years, I have not faced fraud, double brokering, or theft, believe it or not. And you know what bothers me the most, guys, is that over this time frame, I didn't have those tools, by the way, back then. We have an overabundance amount of tools today, yet it's running abundance all over the place. It's not stopping. It's very aggressive. It's taking it's taking traction. Nobody seems to know how to stop it. What's going on? Dale, let's start with you first. What's going on?
Well, I think one of the reasons is that the bad guys have more time, energy, and money than we have on the defensive side that they have on the offensive side. The other problem we have is that we're too busy, or we spend a lot of time reacting rather than being proactive. None of us really concentrate on the enemy enough. I think one thing, when I was in the Marine Corps, we several times read the book called The Art of War by Sun Tzu. And that says if you know the enemy, you're probably better in the fight. Go back to, 45 years ago, back when, I don't know, were there wheels on trucks back when you started? I don't remember, but
I don't know, but I did build the pyramid. So, we had those stone wheels, and Bill was right next to me, helping me put up those blocks. I mean, he's a strong son of a bitch, I'll tell you.
But what we have to think about is that fraud really, first of all, back, let's say 10 years ago, fraud wasn't really talked about much because people had such a relationship with their broker. If they admitted they were fraud or or a victim of fraud, they would think they'd lose their customer because they were maybe incapable of doing a good job. So it wasn't reported very much. Then you go back about 5 years ago, I think that fraud really got a kickstart because everybody was forced to work at home during COVID. And so we couldn't find folks to, and the amount of freight went up, with Amazon and all those kind of things. There was more freight moving than for, quite a time before that. So you couple with the more business and less people because the government at that time was paying people to stay at home, getting $56,000 a year to watch Scooby-Doo and play video games, that we couldn't hire people. So What was the answer? We went and started nearshoring and farshoring and hiring folks from Eastern Europe, Colombia, and the Philippines. And so that's how we filled our gaps when it came to personnel. So during that period from 2020 to 2022, we were teaching people how to do this job. And some of those guys ended up being probably better brokers than some of us were. They're hardworking people. Then you fast forward a little bit and people start coming back to work. Now what do? These guys who make $500 a year, $500 a month, $600 a month, that income's gone. So now they've got to figure something out. They learned very quickly because LinkedIn was telling them how easy it was to get authority. So they go and have their friend get a $300 Visa gift card, get somebody to give them a broker bond or insurance, and fill out a BOC3, and they're in business. It didn't matter what their name was or if they marked if they're a U.S. citizen. They realized real quickly how they could make a lot more than $500 a month brokering freight or owning a trucking company and have somebody else be their go-to double broker to them guy. So that's where frauds really ramped up. And the more they told folks about it, the more they learned and how much money, more money they're making. They're at the top of the world making just tons of money. The problem now is that the economy's changed and those people are still there trying to take the money from the rest of the people who are trying to make money the right way. So a long-winded answer to a short question, but that's my opinion.
Yeah, and we talked about this several times, and I'm sure I talked to the group about this. I know at least two people I have. Roadmaps. It's unfortunate, but a lot of people that are trying to do the right thing were actually creating the loopholes for the bad guys to actually read, look at, and go, aha. It's an aha moment for them, how to circumvent and to get through those barriers a lot quicker. And I know it's wrong. It's wrong. And LinkedIn is good for many things, and sometimes it's bad.
Yeah. And I think that the more things that we talk about, and I go back to when my dad was an owner operator. Y'all remember the Fuzzbuster? Every time Fuzzbuster company came out with a new radar detector, the police came out with a better radar gun. When they came up with a better one, Fuzzbuster. So that's what we're doing with fraud. We keep coming up with, principal place of business. We've kind of eliminated 2,500 people out of the system. So now they're looking at, I'll just steal the identity instead. I'll do this instead. I'll make up. So every time we come up with something, they're going to come up with something new. They're thinking a lot of them think way ahead of us. So, but again, we're always on the defensive. And I think that one of the things we'll get into maybe a little later is talking about the Freight Fraud Task Force, which is something that should have happened 2 years ago through the U.S. government at the urging of some senators and congressmen. They didn't do it. So we've got to take, again, matters in our own hands. And we've got to start building groups and coalitions and bringing people together and having committees that let's teach people. Let's teach a shipper that you can't just let a truck come in here with a pickup number and let him go with your freight. We got to teach brokers how to deal with the shipper and the carrier and teach each other how to do things. So training has got to be the first part of it to look out to know what to look for so you don't get scammed. We spend way too much money fixing problems rather than the 5 minutes it would take to avoid the problem in the first place.
Correct. And I'll go to the guy that helped me build the pyramids. Bill, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, when you look at it, in fairness, I was fortunate enough when I worked for Transcore DAT's sister company up here in Canada. They were big on looking at, technology and things of that nature. But one of the courses that we attended, and this was back in 2012, and they had the ambassador from the US, they had the FBI, and they had the cargo police from Canada do a presentation to us at that time. Mm-hmm. And they showed us the real life Catch Me If You Can cargo thief. And he did a presentation in front of all of us in the auditorium that day. And within 10 minutes, he showed how he and his crew had emptied a full 53-foot full of electronics without waking the driver. At that point, when the driver, of course, shows up, he's just as shocked as the shipper is when he opens up his doors and his trailer is completely empty. They removed the pins on the doors, pulled it down. 4 guys come out with pallet jacks, empty the truck, put the door back up, pins on it, and away they go. The whole thing
How long did that take?
It took 10 minutes when he did it with his watch and went click. So in my case, I guess when you look at it from the people I'm fortunate enough to be connected to, yourself and all the rest of the panelists here, I was basically more of the awareness guy. So when I started seeing in 2022 some of the things changing with COVID towards the end, I started at that point writing articles to try and help educate our industry, or at least bring awareness to it, from the standpoint of what was happening with respect to fraud, double brokering, which were all on a rise because now you couldn't just take freight from somebody and get paid because the rate was $9,000. When the rate dropped back, of course, to $3,000, people started resorting to stealing and double brokering. So as I tried to write articles to let people make sure they did vetting, did things the right way, some of them I took some backlash on. Some of them people didn't understand for over a year. Like when I did the behind the COI, even insurance individuals were reaching out to me going, well, you shouldn't be doing that. And that's not your responsibility. You're not doing it correctly. Now here I am a year later and I sit on insurance panels because they're like, to Dale's point, why didn't we start this 2 years ago? Drew, I've learned a lot from with respect to all of that. Mm-hmm. When you look at exclusions now have gone from 7 standard exclusions to 14. 3 of them are against the Transportation Act, and no carrier or shipper is going to get paid when these things take place. All right. So the cargo theft becomes even more of a challenge when we're not vetting a full COI and or insurance policy. And I understand you can do so much with a COI and find, like a real fraudulent one and everything else. I even have been on shows, whether it be John's, whether it be the Freight Lounge, yours in the past, Jeff, we've talked about the simplest thing for most people I've tried to get across. If you have a COI in the bottom box and under cargo doesn't have all perils listed, ask for policy. More importantly, then I had a guest author, being Drew, come in and support and put in there. You should always request for the policy and the contract to come from the insurance broker themselves. Asking a carrier who's already fraudulent and going to double broker your freight to send you a policy, and you think you're getting the exact policy without it being doctored, it's a real challenge. And then I get people that reach out, DM, or call me when they have this take place. They're like, okay, well, what do I do now? Well, unfortunately, when the horses are out of the barn, you're not going to be able to crawl them back in that position. And then factor now with the U.S., with reptiles and shock and nuclear verdicts going on. And I read recently the U.S. is looking at putting a stop to this in all states. It's only complicated things matter with trucking companies being assets companies, especially being the target for lawyers, being the target for double brokers, being the target for insurance companies. and bad brokers themselves. So when, we did this together at one point, Dale, myself, and Drew, we were flattered and asked to be part of a task force, I guess almost 2 years ago now, correct, guys?
Yeah, about that.
Yeah.
But the problem being is the way that the organization, the group that wanted us to join was going about it, there was just too many challenges, and they really weren't going to be able to have any cause or effect on what they were putting forward because they weren't going to tackle the problem at the root, which is the FMCSA. So,
Well, another part, I just want to jump in here really quick on that.
Yeah.
That group was one of the transportation trade organizations, right? Where they have groups of there's OIDA and there's TIA, and they have separate groups. Any of those that try to put together a freight fraud task force are two against the other player to make it all right. So they take, if it's, let's say it's OIDA, they take their side and forget about the broker's portion of fighting fraud. TIA does the same thing. They don't think about you have to have, and I'm glad, Jeff, that you came with the idea of a freight fraud task force that includes everybody. That's the only way it's going to work. If we try and do it in a silo, it's never going to happen. I mean, it'll happen, but it'll never work.
Yeah.
So my last comment, Jeff, before you move on to the rest is, as I've been saying over the last little while now, what I think the biggest challenge we have at the moment is regulations are great, but if they're not enforceable and there's no real penalty to match what they're doing. So getting back to the individual the FBI brought in, the real life catch me if you can cargo thief, they had actually jailed him 13 times. After the 13th one, they let him out again, I think at 3 weeks or 5 weeks later again. So the FBI said enough's enough, and they brought him in to teach them how to start stopping cargo fraud and made him an FBI payroll agent. So watching what they were doing and listening to these individuals, you knew they were taking it seriously. California, for example, has 42 cargo police. At the time, we had like 2 in Ontario. So you're talking about the amount of theft taking place in California obviously was much higher than obviously Ontario, but still nobody's taking it seriously. There's no jail time. There's no real penalty for it. If you invoke all of these rules, what's really going to happen to you?
Nothing.
I think that's super important that everybody knows. I think all of those agencies, including local police, know how to fight fraud. They know how to fight crime. That's their job. They've been doing it forever, but they choose not to do it for some ungodly reason. And that's one of the reasons that we just decided a couple of weeks ago to start thinking outside the box. If they're not going to put them in jail, we're going to put them on TV. We've got news companies around the country now. We had a show on just on the 11th a couple of days ago about a scandal that happened down in Texas. That showed that double brokering had a play in this, and that the shipper was responsible for the death of 6 people because of there were icy roads in there and everything, but the double broker gave the load to an unsatisfactory carrier that had an unsatisfactory safety rating. So I'm going to start making these folks famous. We got a group of about 100 companies that are all combined in Ohio, New York, and Florida. They're going to be on TV in about 2 weeks. So when you start seeing, when brokers and carriers start seeing these people on TV and getting exposed by investigative journalists nationwide, because they have that ABC affiliate has 45 affiliate offices across the United States, our first show is going to be about that group. And then we're going to talk about how we're going to hold Congress, accountable. If they told the FMCSA to do something 2 years ago and they didn't do it, and one of the authors of that letter was J.D. Vance as a senator, we're going to put a mic in his face and ask him, do you have any more pull now as a vice president to make the transportation secretary do what you told him to do?
Yeah.
So,
John, before we get into the claims and insurance, I know that's plays a huge part in it. John, let's get your feedback on this whole thing. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, we've been seeing all sorts of craziness go on. I first got into this as the double broker bounty hunter, as a dispatcher, because back when all this really started getting popular about 4 years ago, these guys were skimming off the top. The double brokers were getting these loads from the real brokers, taking a cut of like 30% off the top, selling it to a real carrier, but they got away with it because they were paying the real carrier the amount that they had promised the real carrier. And the guys that I dispatched for, they and I started noticing patterns on BOLs, and we figured out who the bad guys were. We started intentionally booking loads with them because we knew we could make an extra $300, $400, $500, $700 on that load by booking them and busting them once the car goes in the truck. So that's what we started doing. And that's how I got the nickname, the Double Broker Bounty Hunter. Now that they have changed the rules of the game, and this is specifically with the double brokering piece, they're now stealing the entire freight bill. With them stealing the entire freight bill, now drivers are coming to me saying, hey, I got scammed. I didn't get paid for this load. I was supposed to get $7,000 for it. What am I supposed to do? And Jenny knows this story very well. Jenny and I have worked together and collaborated on a lot of these types of cases. And now I've got a commercial collections license of my own, so I can try to help these guys collect. Again, as Dale had mentioned, we are operating on our back foot. We are reacting to everything these guys are throwing at us. And what is great about the Freight Fraud Task Force is that we're now taking the fight to them. And we have to, because it's the only way to disrupt what's going on. The problem is getting exponentially worse. At the very least, we have to at least slow it down so we can get our hands around it. And the task force now is starting to do that. Task force is throwing a new tactic at these bad guys that they're not expecting. It's going to be very difficult for them to get around it. Now, the international guys, that's one thing, but there's so much of this problem is domestic, and a lot of people don't realize it. They think it's the Ukrainians or the Russians and the Indians. No, guys, that's only part of the problem. I'm chasing this one carrier right now who is scamming his owner operators by not paying them. I have recorded over 54 victims since April of last year. And I've had 2 more just this week. One I talked to this morning who's about to deliver a load for this guy. He is not on contract, which is a violation of 49 CFR 267. He has no insurance through his carrier because his carrier is not providing anything. And he's hoping like hell he's actually going to get paid. And we know damn well he's not based on this carrier's history. These are the people who are destroying this industry, and they're doing it out of their own greed, and then are causing these owner operators to become desperate because they're about to lose their homes, they're about to lose their trucks, they're about to lose everything they have. So then they are going to end up resorting to nefarious means themselves just to save their own skin and put food on the table. It is a vicious cycle, and we have to do something to stop it. And that's one of the things I really love about this task force and what it's designed to do. Hopefully we can put a dent in this.
Yeah, desperate people do desperate things in desperate times. That's for damn sure. And here's a mind-boggling number, and we'll get to Drew and Claudia and Jenny on this. Cargo theft in the United States is between 20 to 35 billion dollars. That's a B, folks. That's not an M. It's out of control. It is out of control. And it takes all of us, it's the trifecta, the way that I look at it. It's from the carrier side, it's from the broker side, and it's definitely from the shipper side. We're all accountable for everything that we do, because all of this stuff, and Dale and I had talked about it many times, all of this is avoidable. All of it. If you just took the right steps and measures to pretty much go into CYA, because people don't realize it's your brand, it's your image, and your reputation that are at stake. And when these things happen, insurance rates go up on carriers, insurance rates go up on shippers. I mean, it's the gamut, brokers. I mean, it's across the board, and they don't realize it. Does it have to do with training? You're damn straight it does. We've discussed this plenty of times. If you're not making money, you may do a deal and not even vet anybody and just get that carry on because it's cheap, because you want to make $700. So like you said, John, I mean, there is nefarious stuff that are going on. So let's get into the. Go ahead.
To put that in perspective, Jeff, when I started in collections 6 years ago now, my first owner of the agency I worked for said, "Hey, there's freight fraud out there, freight debt out there at $350 million a year, and we barely scratched the service of 1% of that." Okay, that was 5 years ago, and you said it's what now? So that's
between
350 million
and $35 billion. That's with a B.
Over 5 years.
Yeah.
So that's how much it's grown in 5 years. And I can tell you the first year that I was doing collections, I took all of November and the first 2 weeks of December and counted up the number of bad brokers we were posting on our little alert. I think there were 18 the first year. And it has grown year over year exponentially until to this year. We were adding 25 brokers a week,
Oof.
at least, for all of November and the first 2 weeks of December. Those are
It's
brokers that are reported for non-payment or are set to go out of business. So
what's really sad is that
1,300. That's 1,300.
it's
That's
sad that
I just did
consumer
November and
doesn't
December, but
understand.
yeah. Go ahead,
I
sorry.
mean, that's
It's sad that
annual,
the
though.
consumer doesn't understand how much this affects them. The price of eggs isn't just high because of bird flu. The price
That's
of jeans aren't high just because of whatever. The price of a lot of commodities are high because so many are stolen. So somebody's got to make up the money on it somewhere. When you start looking at billions of dollars, well, that's why things cost. That's one of the reasons things cost more. Let's stop blaming inflation and blaming all these other things. Fraud and cargo theft have a lot to do with what we're paying at the store.
Indeed, indeed. So, Claudia, you were going to say something before. What's your intake on this?
Okay, so I'm going to be the bad guy. It's not going to get fixed until it hits the pockets enough of the people who have the actual ability to change it. And it's not going to get fixed until you want it to be fixed. Period. And I don't mean you as in like the industry, right? I mean, you take brokerages who will say, you have a carrier or a broker and says, I don't want to be involved in freight fraud. Okay. In order to not do that, these are the things that you need to do. This is what you need to check for every single truck. Well, if I check that for every single truck, then I'm not going to be able to meet capacity and be able. That's not what we're talking about. I'm not talking about your capacity. I'm talking about mitigating the risk and stopping it. Now, I understand that with everything there is a risk, right? Within all the things. It's like, do I take the risk of, making this bid expecting that freight is going to remain at its current rate? Do I guarantee that to my customer? There's all kinds of risks that need to be involved in it. But when you're looking at someone who is working off of load boards in general, when you're talking about freight across load boards, there is going to be an immense amount of risk for this type of fraud. And if you do not go through the steps that it takes to assure that you are talking to the right person and that you are talking to the right, whether it be the brokerage or the carrier or the driver, then you are absolutely putting yourself at risk. You're putting yourself at risk when you have low bids and you're like, oh, well, they came in under the rate that I needed for that. They came under my target rate. Or, oh man, I'm going to make a lot off of this load. Because listen, it's possible that you found a carrier who just needs to get home and you're going to go and they're going to take the rate. Or more than likely, that's not the case. And you're either hiring a carrier who has a low safety rating, or you're hiring a carrier who is going to double broker it. You're not even hiring the carrier, you're not even talking to the right carrier at all. But you have to have those steps in place. Setting procedures isn't going to work unless you have somebody to audit, like Bill was talking about for accountability, right? You can't, or I don't remember if it was Bill or Dale saying, like, if you have the rules in Congress, it doesn't matter if you don't have someone who has the authority to go back and check it. It's the same within any company, right? Several of you all have your own companies. Several of you all have had plenty of employees. There are several employees in the world that you can say, hey, this is your job, and you fully expect them to do it. For the vast majority, you can say, this is your job and I expect you to do it. And then they're not going to until you go back in and you double check and you make sure that they're doing it, right? I don't go, like my trainer, there's a reason that she has an app on my phone that tells her whenever I do things, right? Like I'm not going to lie to her and tell her I'm not doing something or I am doing something that I'm not. But the point is, like, accountability is there across the board. So we talk about it at the government level, which I'm not even touching that. I'm gonna let Bill and other people and Dale be involved in the whole government part of it because I'm disgusted. But when it comes to individuals and what you're doing on the ground, what we as brokers and carriers are doing in order to prevent this within our own house, that's on, we have to decide that we're going to fix it. And sometimes that decision is going to affect our pocketbooks. And it will, period. Flat out, it's going to affect it. Whether or not it affects it on the front end, as far as like the business is concerned, or on the back end from a consumer. And frankly, it's going to hit you as a consumer anyway. So I just, there are plenty of things that we can do, and we can talk about steps that owner operators can take. We can talk about steps that brokers can take. We can talk about vetting tools that are available and all the different types of tools that are available in order to help fix this problem. But you have to want it. And you have to decide that this is what you want, and you're going to stick to your guns to do it. And I'm telling you right now, there's not enough who are willing to do that, who to make this stop. There's going to be an immense amount of brokerages who don't care, who aren't going to take those steps. As long as you check mark the boxes, they don't care. They don't look into the COIs that Bill is looking into, that Drew is looking into. They don't go back and get all the additional information. They just say, well, it's in the platform. That's all I need. No, it's not all you need. That's my personal opinion. Whatever is decided by that company for their level of risk and what they want to take is fine. But
and carriers are okay with it too, because they're not vetting well either. So
Nope.
And that's what I'm saying, is on all sides. You have to make that decision
Mhm.
that you're going to do that. And we have got to,
Here's the
and shippers have to have their pocketbook hit enough that they actually do start coming back and checking those trucks, checking those things on the front end and making sure of that. Like, I have ideas of things that we can do to mitigate that, but guess what? They cost money. And if you can't get a shipper to put in a tracking device that's $10 or $15 for a load that's over $100,000, I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah.
Like, I'm
You know,
here.
I'd
I'm
like to
here
say,
to help. I'm here to be a resource. But y'all, like, we have to make the decision to do those things.
Go ahead, Dale.
the one thing that I think that we as an industry have missed the boat on, from the FMCSA to the load boards to the vetting companies to every stakeholder, we have concentrated so much on reducing the odds of being victimized that we forgot about just eliminating the threat in the first place. So if we get the bad guys that are breaking the law out of it, now we can go to the part about having risk assessments and saying, how can I minimize my odds? Because now we're only minimizing those odds on guys that have passed certain criteria that maybe they shouldn't have been in business in the first place. So we have got to work on getting the bad guys out. And I'm not plugging FreightValidate, but I'm the only one of these vetting companies that says, let's look for the law first. If they're in violation of a state or federal law, don't even look and see how long they've been in business. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how many inspections they've had. All those things just don't matter if they're in violation of federal law.
Yep. And you know what? That's one of the reasons why. And if you see me on the load boards or on the spot market, just shoot me in the head. You know, I want to minimize my risk. And that's one of the reasons why I don't do it. I'm dedicated. I'm not spot market. You'll never see me out there because, one, like Claudia said, got high risk out there, right? You get the bad guys that are hanging out there. I want to minimize that. I want to minimize fraud, double brokering, and the possibility of theft. I want to build long-term business relationships with the damn people that I do business with. I want to know them in and out. I'm going to do my vetting. I'm going to tell my shipper to do the vetting. As soon as that driver pulls into that dock super is going to walk out there and look at the name and the MC number on the side of the freaking door, right? I'm going to tell him, hey, this is the MC number that will be picking you up. Make sure if it's otherwise, from what I just told you, don't load them. Get rid of them, and I'll report them. Take the other MC number. Let me know what that is, and we'll go from there. But there's so many damn steps in there, and it's ridiculous. That's why I do dedicated.
The fraud.
Hey,
The fraud is. Sorry, I didn't mean to talk over you.
We also have we also have a responsibility, I think, to train the shippers. If you look at the video I have on LinkedIn about that case with FedEx, they were the shipper. They gave the load to somebody who double brokered it. FedEx is being sued in a wrongful death situation because they didn't do their due diligence as a shipper. They admitted that they don't have a policy for checking those kind of things. Well, that case is going to go to court this summer. And when we start seeing shippers being held responsible in nuclear verdicts and wrongful death claims, people have got to change what they're doing because that's going to cost them a lot of money.
Oh, yeah. It's
a jury of people is going to blame the big guy no matter what.
Right. But it's not just nuclear verdicts. You're talking thermonuclear verdicts. Big.
Even worse, death.
Like the one in Texas.
Wrongful death is even worse than all of it.
Yeah. Go ahead, Drew.
Hey, Dale, when you talk about that FedEx litigation, that's not their first rodeo. They've had several of these in the past. New Mexico, I think 5-6 years ago, similar situation happened where they admitted again that they didn't have these processes in place. One of the things I would say, and Claudia mentioned it, is that, freight has to move. I get it. And what I see on a regular basis, I probably say 3 or 4 times a week, people are getting a hold of me that I have never had any relationships with, and they will have a claim. The claim will be $40,000, $50,000, $60,000. And believe it or not, I turned it down. Why? Because they didn't do any vetting on the front end. And you see these folks on LinkedIn and they want to holler foul. The reality of it is that they did no vetting at all. Okay. And, so I would say that in respect to what Bill was talking about, when it comes to looking behind the COI, we do it. That's great. But I go to what Jeff talked about, and Claudia did as well, when it comes to having a base of motor carriers that you're dealing with on a regular basis. Okay, because if you're just dealing with load boards, like Claudia said, you're going to get what you get. That's the terminology I use. And the reason I say that is that there's simply not enough time to vet them. You can't. It's not going to happen. I hear people say all the time, well, in my vetting process, I call the insurance agent or insurance broker and I ask a series of questions and they answer. Okay, so you do that. Claim occurs and you go back to your notes and you say, well, the insurance agent or broker says that the coverage was there. Well, guess what they're going to say? They're going to say that conversation never happened. Okay, that's what they're going to say. And what do you have now? And he said, she said. Okay, so I've talked about it before. If you're not willing to go through the process of documenting your conversations via email, you're going to have a problem on the back end. No question about it. If you're not willing to go through the process of, and Claudia said it again, there's some risk involved. Sometimes freight's got to move. Okay. And if you have to do that, load board spot quote, I get it. But you should be working toward a situation where the majority of the freight you move is dedicated carriers and you took the time to vet them. Or again, as others have said here, sometimes you have to walk away from that freight. When it comes to, vetting these carriers, you gotta, if you're a freight broker or a shipper, you gotta have the insurance agent or broker at the table. Everybody has to be a part of the process. Last thing I'll say about it, because it's a lot, when it comes to looking behind the COI and the endorsements and so forth, have done it, guys. And I'll tell you, I'll give you one real example that happened years ago where we looked at a COI. There was a bunch of red flags there. And the certificate holder, they really want to do business with this particular motor carrier / freight broker, right? And so, we had a conversation about it. It was clear that there was no due diligence in place on behalf of the freight broker / motor carrier. So the certificate holder asked us, would we go through the process of reading the endorsements declarations? Our response was, unless you're reading the entire policy, terms and conditions and everything, there's no point in just looking at the declarations. And so we took it a step further. We says, okay, we'll do it, providing that your outside counsel reads, the policies, endorsements, everything. And we had an independent insurance agent with 30 years in trucking read it as well. Guys, after doing that, that was about, believe it or not, all those conversations, we got 30 hours into this, okay? 30 hours. When we get to the end of it, I'm talking with general counsel, I'm talking with the insurance broker, and we all agreed that the policy we had in front of us had nothing to do with what we were talking about, even though it had the motor carrier's name on it, okay? Now, this gets back to what John was talking about. We get back to the insurance agent, and we says, okay, where's the real policy? The insurance agent said, can't give it to you, can't allow it to be in the public sphere. And as John was saying, this wasn't someone that was from Ukraine or whatever. This was an insurance agency that had multiple offices across the country. And this was a senior level person that we were communicating with. And so what my point is that unless you're willing to do thorough vetting, you're going to wind up on the short end of the stick. And it's more likely than not high dollar claims. Because like I said, I turn away 10 or 15 a week. that are 30, 40, 50, $60,000, where I just have to tell the people, look, there's nothing here. And their response is, well, I got shafted or whatever. The reality of it is they didn't vet the carrier. They didn't.
Well, one thing I'll add, because I have a bit of a hard stop as well as I shared with all of you as panelists. So when I was on John's show with Jeannie as well, and I'm not sure if Claudia was on that one, but I had mentioned at the time, when you're vetting carriers, it should be restricted to certain individuals within inside your company.
Yes.
Dispatchers can introduce carriers into your network. They can bring them in to meet with people and all that wonderful stuff. If they're local, that's great. But, in our organization, and we move a little over 200,000 shipments on an annualized basis, so it's not like, a smaller operation with a lot of things going. We have 3 people that can actually approve the carrier when it's fully vetted. In addition to that, the other comment that was made, until shippers feel the pain. I've met with many. The shippers right now, they're starting to feel the pain, guys. Good. When you look at the double brokering, one of the largest food companies in North America, they hired a carrier, and right now they have 43 double brokered loads with carriers all coming back after them with the BOL Act in Canada holding the paper that did the actual work. And of course, they're advising people they've got it under legal, but the reality is under the Transportation Act, they're going to have to pay the carrier that did the work.
Yep.
So they're starting to feel that. In addition to that, you start to look at, there's groups in the United States of some very large shippers that we all rely on and all love. They've been getting together and meeting because this is becoming more of a challenge because it's affecting them now. Because no matter what, at the end of the day, there are brokers that we have identified, and Drew has helped me with some of them, and so has Dale. And Dale introduced me to a contact in California that really blew one up in front of me. But the insurance broker themselves are actually involved in the scam with their carriers.
Right.
So now when these people don't do that vetting and everything else, when they call the insurance company and the broker, the first thing they turn and say is, I'm not at liberty to send that information. My advice, as I've given to everybody online and or when they call me, do not hire the carrier. Move on. If they can't provide an insurance policy from an insurance broker, that should be every hair in the back of your neck standing up, every red bell going off, stop.
Stop, yep.
That is not somebody you're going to get protection from. In all likelihood, they're going to steal the load before you actually let the ink dry on that load tender you just sent.
You know something, Bill? You know something? You see this thing on the back of my whiteboard?
Mm-hmm.
Cheapest is the most expensive way to conduct business, and that's why it happens. When you start going to the bottom and trying to get the cheapest rate to save money, that will be the worst dollar that you ever spent, because it takes one incident for a nuclear verdict to happen that will either shut your doors or bankrupt you for millions of dollars because you wanted to save $700 on a load. It's ridiculous.
Right. But the shippers, so a lot of the shippers like that we work with, like our assets, 90% of them are dedicated to shippers. Mm-hmm. Those shippers didn't pay increases through COVID. They've not had any freight fraud. They've not had any freight damages.
Yep.
So when you talk about contracted freight with the shippers, they haven't had the big swings. They haven't had the same cargo challenges and or double brokering taking place, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
So contracting and dedicating freight is still the way to go. But when you get into companies that are going to move 50,000, 100,000, 300,000 shipments in a year, they have to learn how to vet quicker, use the right tools. Yes, I'm biased as I've written with respect to FreightValidate. Get people that can help train you and teach you process on how to do it. And then from there, the next portion is, because at a certain point, we removed 4,800 carriers. Well, sorry, our vice president of operations removed from our largest brokerage, removed 4,800 carriers and shut them all off and made them all reapply and go through the FreightValidate and all the process and everything else. Of that, unfortunately, I think 3,500 carriers did not pass.
Wow.
So we drove our operations and our drop operations people into a real challenge to still cover freight and that many loads, when meanwhile, they just lost 3,800 carriers.
Just like carriers have to vet their broker every time that they use them. Every time you need to vet them. Even if you used them last week, you should vet them again this week, because maybe it's falling out of compliance. The same thing happens with carriers. And when you don't go through and revamp, make them reapply and go through the vetting again, you miss a lot of those things that have come up.
Correct, Jeannie. And that's why, again, when you look at FreightValidate, these owner-operators in OIDA, they can actually get on the system for a much better price, and they can actually vet the broker. And right now, because carriers I know on LinkedIn, there's certainly tensions and everything else, but that aside, the carriers right now seem to think brokers control the market, make all this money and everything else. That's all dog pucky, as we know, but the reality is, never mind the amount of carriers we've lost, but how about the last report? 200 brokers on average we lost per month in the United States alone. So I still question, and I've got some people trying to dig and help me with this. I still believe some of those 200 we lose every month are the bad MC numbers that get recirculated.
Yeah.
I know Dale agrees with me, but I don't have the physical proof yet. And I've got somebody working on that to see if it's real. Then the other aspect is right now, because of the challenges going on with the cargo theft, yes, I promote Drew, and yes, I believe and I work with Drew, and we do a lot of different things together because never mind he's bright, but when you look at the fact of going in behind and looking at what's actually covered and not covered, that's where I started to learn 2 years ago that, hold on a second, so this one here says if they lose it on their dock, their truck, or deliver it to the wrong customer, they're not liable for that claim. I mean, so hold on a second, how can I ever give you freight? So you're allowed to screw up every which way you want, and you're still not going to pay me.
Yep.
So there's a lot of challenges, but it's really starting to affect shippers now. And I think that's why there's more of a view coming to this at this point. With everybody on this call, and you've all been fabulous to bring awareness, to keep this in front of people. I think the message is getting through to the people that need to look at this. And of course, I'm going to keep putting out posts to promote Dale Prax to run and lead the FMCSA until it actually happens.
There you go. There you go. Go ahead, Dale. Dale, you were going to say something before.
Yeah. When we talk about the brokers, and Bill, you're absolutely right. We watch this every single night. We see that the influx of how many brokers, how many carriers are approved every night. And we have a robotic process automation that checks to see if they're in compliance and all those kind of things. Since April, and numbers don't lie. In April of 2023, the FMCSA was putting in 50 a week, 200 a month that we caught that were working out of a post office box, a Staples store, a UPS store, those kind of offices. 200 a month. We brought that to their attention. We showed them how to fix it. We went through the process. So they were doing what we're doing. We're blocking them from FreightValidate. Now they're blocking them from FMCSA. So in the last 5 months, they've only approved one. And we watch it every night. They were doing 200 a month. That's where 200 a month are not coming into our system. Maybe they're doing other addresses, but they certainly aren't breaking the law, so they aren't applying. So in 4 months, they've approved one. It was a Staples store. I called them on it. We found out that the guy actually owned the Staples store and he was starting a courier company. So that's pretty good. The other point I want to make about, and you all are right about, 2 points. One is vetting every single load. People are buying and selling MC numbers every single day. We've got a new process. We're fixing that, making that better. But that's a guy can own the company today, but that scammer could have sent him, $6,500 in Venmo last night and now owns his company or his MC number. So you've got to vet every single one. The other point, when Bill talked about, vetting the carriers, vetting the brokers, a problem that we're seeing trending right now, and you have to be very, very careful of this, are the big carriers, the big brokers that have an agent program. And they have their agents all over the country, some all over the world. What's happening, and we're seeing this happen even more, a company will have their MC authority go out of business, out of service for doing something wrong, and they've had a book of business, but their book of business is the DAT board. They're going on the DAT board as a broker, getting loads and giving them to carriers. So now they've been put out of business by the FMCSA or by me or somebody. Now they're going to the big companies that have agents say, I'd like to be an agent. Most of those agents don't care about your past. They care about your book of business. So they're bringing them on, and now they're making that big carrier look bad because they're brokering loads as an agent and not getting caught as fast. John knows exactly what I'm talking about when it comes to this. We just had one last week. 48 loads, the guy double brokered, right, John?
Yes, 48. That's correct.
Hey, Jeff.
Yes,
in a week.
That's unbelievable. Go ahead, Drew.
Yeah, I would like, we're getting short on time. I would like to close with this on my end. Is that one of the things that I see on a regular basis that's not talked about at all, really, when it comes to vetting, is no one's asking about whether there is any physical damage on the tractors or not. Certs don't have them. Nobody asks. When it comes to trailer physical damage, well, people ask, but they don't dig deep enough. Why is that important? And I've seen this in claims before, and typically these claims are six figures, where you have a tractor trailer get involved in an accident. It's a tow situation. It gets to the wrecking yard, and guess what? The owner operator doesn't have any physical damage coverage on his tractor because it's not required. He knows that. He runs off. It's 30 days later before the shipper finds out about it, right? The cargo's being held hostage, and now you got an $80,000, $90,000 claim, okay, plus whatever the tow bill is. There's no way to get that paid. And so I would just say to people, yeah, all these other things are important, but what about the time that you have the situation that I just talked about, and you lose $100,000? And this, some people might say it's rare. I'll be honest with you guys. I see this, I would say 3 or 4 times a month. I'm getting contacted by someone, same scenario. I look at the information. There's no evidence of coverage for the tractor at all, or it was limited in scope. And the trailer physical damage, depending on what it is limited as well. Wrecking company doesn't care.
You know, I help carriers and brokers both vet every day for free. I mean,
Right.
all they gotta do is call me up. I can't tell them whether or not to use them, but I can tell them what I find out there, so
Right.
they have some extra knowledge. And also, I wanted to say something on the relationships. The relationships are very important, that we build those relationships, because we have this fraud in the freight industry is causing us to have knee-jerk reactions where we don't build relationships, because the people have eliminated the possibility of actual human error. If something goes wrong, it's automatically a scam. It's automatically a fraud. We start getting out the bullhorn and megaphone and yelling, hey, don't use this carrier, don't use this broker because they're fraudulent, they're a scammer. When actually there was just an error made, and it really wasn't anything intentionally fraudulent. So we don't allow ourselves to build those relationships and talk to those people and find out really what happened, because instantly our first thought is it's fraud, because there's so much in the industry.
That is so true. That is so true.
Yeah, I can't imagine how much freight we aren't giving to good guys in the guise of protecting the bad guy, or protecting us from the bad guys. We have become so overzealous that now a freight guard is like, we read the headline, we don't read the story.
Yep.
Yeah,
and I just had that this week. Go ahead.
Yeah, but here's the thing. You could have a bad day. You could have a personality conflict with that carrier, that driver. And you're like, you know what? I'm going to freaking screw that guy. So you put a complaint on, you put up a freight guard. Then the following day, you wake up and you go, you know what? I shouldn't have done that. I'm gonna bring that freight guard down. Hello, that ain't going to happen. That doesn't happen, you know, and a lot of the good guys get screwed because the shipper or the broker had a bad day and they make a complaint about a really decent carrier. It's not that easy to lift those.
I think they should have to wait 3 days. I think they should have to wait 3. I think they should have to wait 3 days to put up a freight guard till after the issue has been gone over with for 3 days. We have 3 days to respond to it, but if you waited 3 days to post it, cooler heads may prevail.
True.
Here's two points I'd like to make on that. One is a person who is an illegal double broker in Pakistan who's been in business for a week can write a freight guard on somebody who maybe caught him, who's been in business for 30 years and has 3 million miles under their belt. That guy goes out of business. The broker keeps going with 2 weeks in the system. Yep. What we did on FreightValidate now is you can go on there and click on report fraud, and we'll take the report, but it can't be some emotional thing. You have to show me documentation. You have to give me redacted rate confirmation sheets. We have to prove this happened. Then we're going to go to the NCCDB and report it under penalty of perjury that says, I'm not lying about this. This guy really did bad. And we're going to make those documents available to all of our subscribers. Actually, anybody. They don't have to be a subscriber. It says this is an actual report going in. It's not, and we're going to we're going to send it to the accused, saying, hey, here's what's being written about you. It's going to the FMCSA's National Consumer Complaint Database. What is your response on it? Because you're going to have to respond to the government. The other part we're going to do is monitor those. Hey, FMCSA, we've sent you 5 now on this same carrier. What are you doing about it? You say you're investigating them. I don't see that you are. Let's put you on the news.
freight brokers are planning 2 years in advance on how they're going. This fraudulent ones are planning 2 years in advance on how they're going to scam you in 2 years. When Pan American Transporters went out in 21, they had $3.1 million against their $75 million bond, the $75,000 bond. They had $3.1 million, and they immediately opened up another brokerage that was aged up 2 years, Spaceship Freight Services. And they already had 2 years under their belt. They'd already been maturing that brokerage MC number, so that when this one got caught, they'd have another one to go to over here, and they could keep on rolling. They had 3 sister companies as well. There were brokers. I mean, you could lay the rate cons right on top of each other, and they matched right down to the grammatical errors. I mean,
Hey, the one thing, because Jeannie, you're absolutely correct, and Dale's pointed out many times, some of these guys have 32 of them, and then they'll go out and buy ones because they have maturity to get them through. But I think we should answer Mario Jones's question I just read here. You all make me feel like FMCSA is on this fraud somehow because how haven't they been able to bring it to an end? It's a great comment, Mario. And the reality is that I don't think that anybody is intentionally in the FMCSA is involved or doing these type of things or part of it. The challenge is there's 1,100 employees with X amount of budget. Their focus is supposed to be safety, which, especially if you listen to armchair attorney, Matt Leffler, they're failing there. You listen to the safety guys and everything else. They're all failing at that already. Yet we're expecting them to issue and vet FMCSA numbers when they can't complete their daily task on a regular basis. So if you took the FMCSA and let them focus on what they're supposed to be focused on, their core competency being safety, truck issues, all that type of stuff, and took MCs away from them altogether, made it go to a different agency, as Dale said in the past, with TWIC cards and everything else employed now, then you would actually have real vetting being done. Then you would know if they're actually located in North America with a real office because you'd be vetting them before they get on. So It's not that they're involved. It's just that they don't have the manpower, and they don't have, I don't believe at this point, they may be getting better, and hopefully they are, but they just don't have the skill set. So essentially right now, FreightValidate, the people like that, they're becoming the compliance department for the FMCSA at this point because it's not their core competency.
Two things on that. One is that if carriers and brokers failed at the same rate that the FMCSA was failing and getting fraud gone, where would we be with our freight? We would not move anything. And the second thing is that we have all of these entities out there that are we have rules out there for double brokering and penalties up to $10,000 plus damages. And if we actually applied all of those rules across the board where we could and raked in those fines and whatever, we would be able to hire more people to police the problem.
Right, but Jeannie, here's the problem, Jenny. So I met 2.5 years ago, before I met Dale and before I met Drew and a bunch of the gang, I met Joe Metton from the DOT. You can find him online, by the way. He's brilliant. And I spent some time speaking with him over probably about a couple of months. Did you know if they actually were the FMCSA went out and fined a broker for a carrier for double brokering, a $10,000 US fine? Even if they did it and collected the money, do you know they don't get it? They take the money and give it to somebody else.
Well, to that point, since 2019, there was a case called the Riojas case. You can look it up, Riojas. Darlene Riojas was her name. She had several companies that were together. They were put out of service, a lot of violations. They had all kinds of fines. An administrative law judge with the FMCSA ruled in that, they're saying he or she ruled, that the agency didn't have the administrative authority to impose civil penalties on bad actions. They took that to mean like, oh, we can't do anything about it because this administrative law judge ruled something. No one appealed it. No one looked into it. If you look at that case, you'll find that they were actually fined $120,000. So that whole thing about, hiding behind this judge's ruling is a bunch of crap. The bad thing about that, last year in the 118th Congress, Eleanor Horton from D.C. and several other congressmen put together H.R. Rule 8505 to make that. It says it's undeniable you have the authority to do it. It's undeniable, and making the rules strict about principal places of business. That rule that went into the House in May of last year. Congress ended. It went away. Luckily, in January of this year, that's been reintroduced into the House. The problem we have to worry about now is with the incoming administration, who says for every regulation that comes in, you have to take 2 to 10 out. How long is it going to take before that even goes into place? So there are the rules are there, but there's no one there to enforce. And I talk to the FMCSA 3 times a week probably, and when I talk to them, and this is no pun intended, they say it takes an act of Congress to get anything done here. They can't change anything. They can't do anything. Their hands are tied. They say the regulation says one thing, but the actual statute says something else, so they can fight it in court. I say just wait till you get fought in court. Kick these people out and let them sue you. If he's a bad guy, he's probably not going to hire a lawyer because he's going to need a defense counsel.
Yeah, you know,
that's what it comes down to. You know what? Start giving them jail time that is serious jail time.
Yep.
And, like right now, your new president, let them all be deported if they are a suspect of any type of nature and causing, crimes of harm. Until we get to a point where that starts to take place, so far at this point, the old saying is, the juice is worth the squeeze. Well, for these criminals, if they're back on the street in 3 to 4 weeks after committing a crime like this, they're going to say the juice is worth the squeeze. Yeah. So there has to be a punishment that goes beyond saying, here's your wrist slapped, and you can't have that MC operating anymore.
It's ridiculous.
Jenny made a great point about being 2 years in advance, right? The bad guys are about 2 years in advance. If anybody remembers, back about 2 years ago, and Bill was part of this when I started, facial recognition verification for everybody. It tells me who they are, where they're standing, with 100% certainty who they are. FMCSA thought that was a great idea. So last year, they introduced that they're going to use IDEMIA for facial recognition verification on new applications. The problem is the bad guys work 2 years in advance. So when they made that announcement on something we know it's going to take 2 years to put into place, they're already putting in things in to fight that, right? So FMCSA's plan is to use IDEMIA, which is the same thing you use at an airport. When you walk through security, it just says that you match your face to the picture. Clear's the separate company. IDEMIA is the government's company through TSA. All it says is you are who you say you are. When you walk through, there's no date stamp of when it happened. It's just a snapshot, right? So how can we have the same program be with the FMCSA? So all I have to do, if I'm a resident of Pakistan, I call my cousin who's in Chicago and say, hey, I want you to apply for authority. You're going to have to give them a picture of your license and a picture of your face just to get through. They're not going to save it. They don't know where you are or anything. But as soon as you get that done, send me the PIN number so I can start double brokering from here. By the time they introduce that, it's going to be obsolete. So my plan to the FMCSA, and I've said this for a long time, is that if you required a TWIC card like we do for 600,000 drivers every year, if you required a TWIC card for every owner of a company that has 5% or more equity in the company, he has to come into one of the 300 locations where you get a TSA TWIC card and put his fingerprints down, take a picture, define who he is, and do a background check. Yes. That stops a lot of fraud. And then if somebody wants to sell or buy your MC number, and you can say, that's my TWIC card behind that. I'm not selling it until you put your TWIC card behind that authority.
Yep. I agree. Dale and I had this conversation once before, and it's concerning. It's concerning. It concerns integration with systems. Now, I used to do beta testing back in a different career I had, and I also developed some TMS systems as well. And when you're developing things, you're doing things side by side. And when you integrate a system, the system is supposed to integrate with your system and scrape what's there to get rid of erroneous data, to get rid of it and to replace it with real data. The problem that I see, and I ran into it, and I'm not going to give any names or anything like this, is that I checked on one company. The company said it was good, and the other company said it was really, really bad, like in vetting purposes. And it's concerning, and there's inconsistency with that. So we're always at an uphill battle with, like I said, we have an influx of proprietary based tools that are fighting fraud and trying to do the right thing. But how do you know when one thing is better than the other, when you're always working against each other, when one is saying bad, the other one is saying good, yet one doesn't have the trailing documents that verify how they came to determination that they were either good or bad, and the other one has those trailing documents. You know, it's like you have to remove the emotions from the decision making, especially in this industry. You have to let pure data speak for itself. So it's like I had a term a long time ago. I believe in God. Everybody else brings data, meaning that I am going to show you, this is your data. This belongs to you. We're going to make a decision on that, not what everybody else is doing. We need to focus in on that in order to reduce your cost or whatever. Same with the fraud, with the double brokering and all of that. Why do we have that? And why is there so much inconsistency? And how do we collectively get to that point where everybody is on the same page with the same determination to get rid of bad guys?
Well, I just want to answer that because I'm deeply involved in that. One thing that's really important to remember is opinions have nothing to do or have no bearing on facts, none whatsoever. However, facts have everything to do with your opinion. So when people use subjective data to determine if somebody's good or bad, it can be manipulated to make a bad guy look good or good guy look bad. The problem with most vetting companies is they use subjective data based on algorithms that they get from maybe data from the FMCSA, which could very easily be false. We find that every day that the guy's name really isn't Michael Jackson or Theodore Nugent. So that data is no good in the first place. To be a good vetter, you have to have been in this industry and know what's going on a little bit. You have to know what an ELD is. You have to know what the requirements for an ELD are, and you can't just disqualify somebody because they have a glider kit or their engine is 1998. Because you have to go by the engine. You have to know those things. You can't just be some company that wants to start a piece of software that's going to fight fraud. I spend miles and hours and time investigating and walking into doors and checking on people and verifying who they are. I put on 600 miles 2 days ago. I have a truck that's brand new that's got 30,000 miles on it. I've had it for about 5 months. So you have to dig deep into this. You have to do investigations. You have to find out who these people are. And to your point, Jeff, you have to document it. If someone is disqualified, you can't just say he's a double broker. You can't just say he's this. If we find somebody that's in violation of a federal law, there's a document image in our system that says, here's a copy of his MCSA 150 or his MCS 5889 that says, I am not affiliated with any other companies. And there'll also be a copy of all the Secretary of State's offices that he's affiliated with, or, the companies he's affiliated with that he owns with the FMCSA. That's how you fight it. That's how you get these guys on notice.
The other thing is we have a lot of big box brokers out there that are what I call bully brokers. They use their volume to throw their weight around and put freight guards on people. And my issue with that is that these guys are industry idols, basically. That's what everybody strives to be, these big box brokers. They want to grow their businesses. And when you're not setting the bar high for those people in the top, it's hard for the cream to rise to the top because, people are looking at people like Uber and C.H. Robinson and TQL and other big box brokers in general. And that's the mark for the industry. So when they're doing bad things, other people are doing bad things also because they're doing it. Why can't we do it? And so I feel like the bigger brokers in the industry need to be the big brothers of the industry and showcase how to do it correctly. And have a higher standard for themselves to help the others rise to the top. And the carriers as well, too. That goes for carriers. The big carriers need to be industry markers for the carriers.
Yeah, I concur, definitely. Go ahead.
From a big box company, the reason that they do that is because if you look at the 320,000 motor carriers that are out there, 97% of those carriers are comprised of 5 or less or 10 or less trucks. So that's a lot of market share. The big guys would like to see those guys go out of business so they get the market share. So it's almost like the old days. There used to be a lot of farmers around, small town farmers. Those were replaced by Tyson Foods and the others. So the same thing is happening with our industry. And so what we have got to do, I think, in the Freight Fraud Task Force as part of this is let's be at a grassroots level and tell the big guys how they should be doing it, because us good guys at the small side are doing it right.
I agree with that. I mean, I just had a situation where I was the second instance of transparency granted by the FMCSA against Uber, and my situation in that situation was that Uber went into this load knowing full and well that the load was double brokered. They had the rate con from the fraudulent broker, and they told the carrier repeatedly to haul it anyways, they would get paid. And then when they got ghosted by the fraudulent broker, then Uber also ghosted them, and I had to really push hard to get them paid for that. So I mean, if Uber is going into it with their eyes wide open and allowing it and knowing it before they ever moved a truck, and the carrier tried 3 times to say, I don't want to take the shipment. I just want them to unload it because there's too many hands in the pie. They said, no, please, whatever you do, we need you to haul this load. You'll get paid. We promise.
And if you don't, you're going to get a freight guard. We just had this situation the other day with a big broker. John and I did same exact move. You know, that they know what's going on. And those guys are you got to go through a lot of training at the big box brokers. You got to go through a lot of processes. They know what's going on. And what a lot of them call, especially if they're asset based, oh, that's just our overflow. That's just our overflow. Well, what's it say on the bill of lading? Well, it says the actual name of the trucking company. Well, then you're violating the law.
Happens all the time. They don't tell you. They do not tell you. They'll commit to the capacity to pick that load up, but when they over capacity and they have that overflow, it goes to the brokerage division. It still says the name of the asset company on there, but a different truck pulls up and loads your freight on it. You know,
and they load them every time.
They load them all the time. I mean, when I was managing a big, huge enterprise shipper, I had my dock supervisor go out. Every driver that came in and banged my door, the driver and him would walk outside. They do a pre-check inspection around there, right? Takes 10 minutes to do that. And then I had my dock supervisor check the DOT and the MC on the door. It would match with the email, whether it was or whatever. I won't name the company, but I refused to load a shipment because a different carrier came in on board. Same thing with FedEx. Let's just use it. It's almost the same thing as FedEx. You know, they have a contract with an organization to pull their freight, and then they take that business and give it to another guy. The guy is unauthorized or didn't have enough training or everything. He pulls it. You know what happened? Same thing could happen to a big shipper. Remember, guys, if you're a shipper out there, your brand image and reputation is at stake with every single shipment that you put out there. You know, you should do the pre-checks. We're getting into that, which is the 392.7 and 392.9. It's a mandatory requirement for all carriers before they haul that they have to do a pre-check inspection, right? Because you have to realize that if a fraudulent driver just says, you know what, the hell with it, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to fill out the DVIR, or I'll fill it out and say everything's right. 250 miles away from the pickup zone, he blows a steer tire, swerves, take out a family of 4, right? Do you want that on your shoulders, guys? That's my biggest question. Do you want to live with the fact that you loaded up a guy that said he did something, he killed a family of 4, now you got to live with it because you hired that guy? There is a thing called forensic accident investigators, state level. They will go out there and reenact the accident, and they will check everything. They look at the tread of the tires. If they see belts showing, and you put on your DVIR 4 mil, whatever, 4 deep of a 34-inch or something like that, was fine, and you did that. That's where nuclear verdicts and thermonuclear verdicts happen. You could close it. There's a closed, door closing event that could happen to you. Don't try to shave corners. It's the responsibility, number one test on the CDL license. When you go out there to get one, number one, pre-check inspection test. It's there for a reason, right? And I guarantee you, I could get in my car right now, and I could go to Piscataway, Perth Amboy, down to Cranberry, New Jersey, pull up to a warehouse, and go ask a driver, show me your DVIR in the morning. Think you have it.
They're going to ask, what's a DVIR?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
I want to back up a little bit on where you're talking about checking the VIN number, or I'm sorry, the DOT number on the door and all that kind of thing. Again,
Yeah.
we have to remember, and I'm going to go back to what Jenny said about 2 years ahead. The criminals know that now. So it costs $20 to stop at Staples and get a magnet that has a DOT number on it and the name of the company, and then you slap it inside the door.
Oh,
What
heck,
we
they
have to
just
do
put
is
paper
pull
and
it off.
they tape it up with paper
Oh,
now.
Yeah,
Well,
pull
I
it
mean,
off
the
and see
professional
what's
guys get a real
underneath.
magnet. But it could be a lease thing, and people don't check the leases. So that's why one of the reasons I like partnering with like my carrier portal. They have a VIN verification. That thing is
I
etched
was
in the
just about
truck.
to say that.
It's not going to change. So that's one way to check to make sure who it belongs to. Then you check it against your cab card. If it doesn't match, something's wrong. You check the cab
Insurance.
card against the insurance and the lease agreement. Boom, you're done, right? Then you take that and you put it with facial recognition verification. I don't care how many MC numbers that you have. You only have one face. So now if you're matching the face to the truck, you got the right guy.
Right.
And that could
within
all
5 feet of where he is.
Right, within 5 feet of where you're standing. And so how we need to go forward, we need to start using QR codes. We need to have the picture verification of the driver embedded in the bill of lading. So when he gets there, the bill of lading shows a picture of the guy. Here's what he looks like. And when he gets to the delivery, better be the same guy in that bill of lading, unless you told us about it.
And that's easy. That you could build a simple app. A simple app
If
that
we
could transfer that. Here's your driver. Here's his information. They go and check it. Here's his picture. All that kind of stuff. Hey, that's not Joe.
If we can shut down TikTok in 2 hours across the world, we can certainly come up with a way to make sure a guy who is at the dock is who he says he is.
Yep.
The VIN verification thing you're talking about, the transparency I was granted from the FMCSA against Uber, it was against Delta Dune was the fraudulent broker and their scam carrier, Maroon Trucking. And I'm going to tell you, Maroon Trucking, there was an article written by Overdrive at the same time the transparency on Delta Dune was written, and that Maroon Express Trucking Company had a history. But looking at the inspections history associated with the truck's VIN number, revealed an astounding 15 inspections between July 10th, 2023 and September 18th, 2023, and the VIN number associated with 10 of those were in South Carolina, and they were by 14. Those 15 inspections, the truck was operated by 14 different carriers.
Ooh.
Yeah.
All with different DOT number identifiers. 3 of the carriers had been placed out of service. The 4th had additional, and 4 have additional inspections within 24 months. But of those 14 carriers, at least one besides Maroon had been accused of double brokering.
Yeah. And so one of the things that I have an issue with is a lot of these vetting companies determine your worthiness based on the number of inspections you've had, right? Or who the truck belongs to by the last time there was an inspection. So the last time they had an inspection, that truck had been sold 5 times since the last year. So what we have to do is we have to get something passed that says we have access to who owns that truck and the plate that goes with it with the DMV. Who owns it today, not the day it had its last inspection, because that doesn't matter. So if we want to get real about it, we got to use real data.
Yeah, but can't you, more than I would say yes, but when you check the MC number, isn't there COIs that are attached to that specific MC number to that VIN number? You could check it against how many times the insurance has changed.
But if he's an owner operator, he could be leased on to 5 trucks in a week or 5 carriers in a week. So, and here's how I catch most of the guys that say, "Oh, I didn't double broker this. This is a lease. We have a lease agreement with this." The first thing I say is, okay, I call the driver. Hey, send me a copy of your lease agreement that you have with that company. Oh, I don't have a lease agreement. We signed something on their app. The lease agreement, the law says that the lease agreement has to be signed, show how much they're getting paid, all those things that are covered in the lease agreement law. And it also says the driver has to have a copy with him in his truck.
Yep.
I haven't found one that's got it in his truck when they say, oh, we lease this to that. He's under lease with us. No, you didn't. You double brokered the load to the guy.
Yep. No, I agree.
But again, I'm going to go back to why does all of this that we're talking about today matter? Why does any of this today we talk about matter? Because we're going to start a freight fraud task force and have experts that not only on this panel, but people from within the industry that are going to start teaching people how to avoid these problems rather than reacting to the problems. Jeff and I talked about this morning. If there's a cargo theft or a bad accident, it takes months, sometimes years to go through litigation and all these kind of things on something that could have been stopped with a 15-minute class and a 5-minute vetting.
And that's one thing when I work with my clients, I educate them. I know John does too. We work together on this stuff. And when I get these guys, I teach them how to vet those brokers, how to look for double brokered loads on their BOLs. And I had a guy that brought a claim to me who was, got over by a double brokered load, about a scam broker. And he called me a couple months later, I guess it was, and he said, Jennifer, I want to take this load. He goes, and it's within the lane parameters, of what it would call, what it normally is running at. And he says, but I don't know, it's got the same name in it that this other one did that got me. He goes, I'm worried about it. I said, take the load off the load board as if you're going to take the load, and send me the rate con so that I can. And then what I did is I called the shipper and just said, who is the broker of record? I have a client that wants to take this one. I want to make sure we don't have fraudulent paperwork. And they said it was C.H. Robinson. I said, well, that's not who gave it to him. We shut that broker down with 5 days, had been authority for 5 days. And so by educating people, they want to know, and this goes hand in hand with, we have CDL farms that pump out, hundreds of drivers with a piece of plastic, and all they know is origin and destination match. Yep. Okay. Get in the truck and go. They have no idea what to look for on the BOL to see that it's double brokered. They have no idea what they're going to encounter out there on the road. And I think that every licensed driver should have to have a week's worth of business training behind their CDL to tell them, what kind of driver do you want to be? Do you want to be a lease driver? Or do you want to be an owner operator? Do you want to be a company driver? And all the other things that you're going to see out there, along with how to identify double brokered loads, how to, know if you, things that you need to do, good practices when you're checking in at carrier shippers and receivers. I tell all of my carriers, hey, make sure you carry a different colored pen other than black with you to sign every rate con or every BOL with, so that when you have the paperwork, you have the original paperwork, and somebody else has a copy of it, because it'll be a black and white copy, but you have a color scan to show, hey, I have the original paperwork right here. It is.
Yeah, that's a great point. 5 months ago, I put a poll out there. What is the most important thing to you as a broker or a carrier? What is your priority as a business owner? Not one of them put safety. Not one.
No.
It's mind-boggling, and it just like I was shaking my head. Safety should be number one in everything that you do as a broker, as a carrier, as a shipper. Priority number one. If you're going to sell anything, you sell safety first, right?
Mm-hmm.
To tell them that you're on top of your game. Here's the reason why, and here's the impact if you don't put safety first. And it all coincides with fraud, double brokering, and everything. Be safe. Use safe practices, procedures. Create work instructions, process improvement plans that are going to protect you as a logistician, because your brand, image, career, right, and reputation is at stake in everything that you do. Yet they put that behind themselves. I don't get it. I try to preach that, because that's what I did over my 45-year career. It's like, I don't want to be something like that. And it's come to an evolution of, it's so blown out of proportion right now because it's running rampant all over the place, not as it was back then, but I was scared. I wanted to do right to my company. I represented my company, I wanted to collaborate with carriers and service providers, which isn't done right now. The relationships aren't there. When we did contracts and we did negotiations and everything, we went to a bar, we had a drink. A handshake was a golden contract. If because I didn't have the tools, if I needed a carrier to go to the Upper Peninsula up in Michigan, I didn't know who that was, because we didn't have the internet. We didn't have anything like that. Hey, Jim, do you know anybody like that? Because these guys are driving all over the place. Oh, yeah, you talk to Joe. That's his lane. He likes that. I get on the phone, I have a conversation. I ask for references, referrals, that kind of thing. Made landline calls, before I put that on it, because I was running some pretty expensive stuff at that time. Never had a problem. I think that's a failure here, that the relationships aren't there like they used to be. They put that in the back. It's all about profits and margins over service and safety and relationships. It really is. It's terrible.
We start teaching kids. Go ahead, Dale.
I talk a lot about facial recognition verification. The very first identity verification system we ever had on this earth was facial recognition verification. You met somebody face to face, you talked to them, you recognize who they were. We've gone fast forward to now, that should be the standard here. So a couple other points I want to make. First of all, when you talk about safety, it should be the most important thing, and that's why FMCSA shouldn't be involved in compliance. There should be a Federal Motor Carrier Compliance Administration. two separate entities. One falls under the TSA, which is part of Homeland Security, which keeps all the bad guys out. The second point I want to make is that the training part, when Jenny's very clear about these guys getting trained. Here's how it should work. And if I was in charge of FMCSA, here's how it would work. Everybody has to have a TWIC card before they can even apply for their authority, so we know who they are with 100% certainty. To get that, they have to go in person to get it, right? So if you're a CDL guy, or if you're on the carrier side, you're going to come in and sit through training about fraud, about driver's licenses, about all those CFR 49, all the things you talk about, pre-tripping. All that's just taken care of in an 8-hour period while you're in there getting your ID taken care of and all those kind of things. We're going to make sure you have insurance. We're going to do your entry audit, your entry safety audit at that time. Not wait 18 months. Only 3% of the trucking companies right now have any kind of safety rating. So if you took care of that in person with their TWIC card, all those kind of things, now you got safe people out there. Don't wait till he kills people and say, we're going to take you out of service because you're unsafe. You should have known that before you gave them the authority. And the last thing I want to say is, because I got to run here, is you all have heard about the FMCSA wants to get rid of all the MC numbers and go to only DOT. It makes sense, on the surface. And they want to introduce this. They've been saying since 1996 they're going to do it next year. But here's a problem that I just ran into this last week about that process. In Sheridan, Wyoming, we've all heard of 30 North Gould Street, Sheridan, Wyoming. Big place for a lot of brokers and carriers are using that address, 1,800 square foot building. When I broke the story to Overdrive and to the FMCSA back in April 2023, there were 300 companies in that 1,800 square foot building that said they were there. None of them are there. Let's just say that first. So since that time, 292 have gone out of business. In other words, their authority's been revoked. Their MC authority's been revoked, and they are gone. They're not in the system at all. 42 are left that are still in that office. Some have been approved in the last couple of days, so they're still approving them. But these guys knew that we were onto them, so they went out of business because they saw their names, or they saw that they're in the magazine. Here's the problem: 292 of those companies have, if you went to licensing and insurance, say their MC number was revoked. If you go to Carrier Snapshot, which most owner-operators use Carrier Snapshot, most brokers use L&I to check on vetting, right, if they're not using a vetting platform. If you go to Carrier Snapshot on those 292 companies, all have current active DOT authority. Because the two systems, MCMIS and L&I, don't talk to each other. So now if I'm a bad guy, I can post a load on DAT and just say, I'm an intrastate carrier. That's why I don't have an MC number that's active. And we're going to give him freight. 292 in one town in Sheridan, Wyoming. Of the 353,000 FMCSA regulated freight entities, how many more are out there in that same situation? So if we turn off MC numbers and turn on DOT numbers, how bad is fraud going to get?
Wow. Yeah, it isn't just an impact of fraud. It is an impact on the entire industry and rates. This is an insane inflation of the amount of capacity that exists in the United States today. I am willing to bet at least 10%, if not 20%, of the listed capacity of trucks within the United States is fraudulent, or it's doubled, the same VIN numbers over and over again. That capacity doesn't truly exist. And yet we're taking all these low rates today as carriers, and there's not much that can be done. It's a supply and demand thing. It's a supply and demand thing. Are you bull? Because the supply that's out there is fake. It doesn't exist. And the sooner we do something about it, the sooner we can get this excess capacity off our backs. And the market should restore itself to normal for real carriers.
That goes right back to what Claudia's talking about when she said, well, I can't find any other truck if I don't give it to this guy. Let's put ourselves in that position so that guy makes more money. He's going to be harder to get, and you're going to pay him for it. Mm-hmm. The rates are going to be better for the carrier.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Jeff said it before. Cheap is the most expensive way to go. There are only three. Yep. It's good, fast, or cheap. You only get two.
You're only destroying yourself. When I was a shipper and I talked to shippers, I was like, why are you going that way and treating your incumbent carriers the way you do? Because you're diving to the bottom. These guys have been with you for 3 years and you're looking to reduce your costs. When the market flips, and it will, and all of a sudden you're in a bind, you go back to the incumbent carriers that you kicked out because they weren't cheap enough, and you go, hey, Bob, listen, I had no choice. The sea level up there put a lot of pressure on me. I had to let you go, whatever, but I'd love to have you come back. You know what I would say to that? After 3 to 4 years, I won't say it here, but that's what I would say to them, because it's like, oh, you're going to screw me? Well, have fun, and they do it over and over.
Read between the lines.
Yeah. And no, and the thing is that they don't realize that they're going to strangle themselves. The word is going to get out there that they are not a preferred shipper. You are not a preferred carrier. You are not a preferred broker. That's what happens. When you go out there and you lie and you cheat and you steal and you try to pull the wool over people's eyes, it's only going to come back to you and it's going to bite you right in the ass hard. Don't work that way. Don't destroy something good. But they do it all the time. It's I don't get it, but I do get it. And that's what I talk about. You're not doing it the right way. You're not. So,
you talked about all the stuff you used to do as a shipper. The many warehouses that I've worked in my career, we used to run those warehouses as if all of them were, what do they call these? The foreign trade zones.
Yeah,
we used foreign trade zone rules. So anyone that came in had to be identified. They had to be logged. Whenever we were loading a truck, we took a copy of their driver's license. I saw the same guy every day of the week, loaded his flatbed every day of the week. I took his license every single day of the week, and I stapled to the back of my copy of the BOL. And our system, we took pictures of every truck, which included the air identifiers on the side of the truck for every single load. And we stapled that to our BOLs as well. It was just what we did every single time. And in 20 years of running warehouses, again, like you, never once has any of my cargoes ever been stolen,
Nope.
ever been double brokered, or ever had any issue, because we went to that level. And if the warehouses, 3PLs, shippers, etc., all did that today, a massive amount of this fraud would not exist.
Everyone needs to slow down. I know everybody wants to go fast. Everyone needs to slow down.
Well, they need to slow down, but also when it comes to theft, and when I was moving $1 million, $2 million loads, geofencing, never put it down the same route. You can't try. It's unfortunate, but a lot of this theft comes from inside jobs and people discussing because they get stuff under the table and stuff like that. You have to talk to one person. And don't let it out of the bag. And every time, even if it's a constant run and it's dedicated, don't go down the same one. Don't go on the same day at the same time. You got to switch it up. When you're talking about safety and protecting your goods, I used to tell my guys, the drivers, I said, did you take a dump? Did you go to the bathroom? Did you eat? Did you fill up both tanks with fuel? Because you're not stopping 300 miles from this facility. I'll tell you that right now. When you bang my dock and load and go, you're there. You're not stopping at a gas station, and then set them up with secured yards and cameras, and that they had to back up against a wall at a facility. They couldn't back up against a chain link fence. That's just a small amount what I used to implement, and a lot of people don't do that, on these high tech loads. People talk to people, especially going to Mexico. That is unbelievable. I can tell you that right now. You really have to, protect your goods. And even when we went down there, we used to have an escort with armed guards that would go into Tijuana and then get out of the van in the front. We would walk in the building, and then we couldn't walk out until they came and picked it up to bring us to the San Diego. It was crazy stuff back then. Really, really crazy stuff. Protect yourself. Do what's right. Common sense isn't that common anymore. We need to get back there. Talk to people that know what's going on and understand the issues.
Think smarter, not harder.
That's my thing. That's what I said. Work smarter, not harder, to do more in less time. That's the way I work. Share the knowledge. Tell them what they want to hear, what they don't want to hear, because that's what your clients are paying you to do. Don't cheat them. That's not the relationship that you want to have with anybody out there. Even if you lose them, tough. You're being you, and you're being honest, and you have integrity, and that's what it's all about. Don't devalue your value ever. I don't care who the hell you are out there. Be you, Tell it the way it is. If they don't like it, it's not meant for you, move on. Period.
Hey guys, I got to hit the road, but I just want to say a couple things. One is that Jeff and I will be sending out some from framework on the Freight Fraud Task Force, looking for your opinions on it, looking for what you want to maybe contribute to this. What do you think we can do to make it better? And we want to be able to launch this out there that says we have a group of experts and we're inviting people to even join us. We'll interview them to make the fight bigger, and make sure we put out there that if you see something, say something. If there's something going wrong, let people know about it. And John and I do this a lot anyway. If you have a problem and there's something going on, we'll investigate it for you. We'll find it.
Absolutely.
Yep,
Absolutely.
myself as well. Any of us will. All of us that were on this panel today, everybody was great, and I know most everybody on the panel from one podcast or another, or meeting them at one time or another, and everybody here is real and genuine, and have the best interests of the industry at heart. So.
Yeah, one of the things, John, real quick, Jeff and I talked about this too. We want to start having podcasts that say we're going to bring a group of insurance folks on here, and we're going to talk about what they do to vet carriers. We're going to bring on some factoring companies here because they have to go through underwriting. What do you do to underwrite these folks? Maybe we can use some of those same practices, brokers, to underwrite our people, and carriers underwriting brokers. Let's use those. So I think we put together these small committees of experts and say, how can we make the industry better and move forward that way? So I think that we've got a lot of potential here to make a big difference. And I'm glad that Jeff came up with the idea, and I'm glad that we have people that are like-minded that want to contribute to it, because I think we all have a passion for this thing. We all have it. We've all moved freight long enough. It's time to make a legacy of doing something to make the industry better that treated us good for the last decades.
Yeah, we are here for the good guys. We got your back.
Right.
You're no longer competitors. You're friends. You want to do the right things, and we're going to back you up, and we're going to make sure that when those things come up, we want you to be able to give us a call, to investigate, to tell you where we're at and what we're going to do to help you to be more successful, and how to discuss this with your shippers and your carriers and vet them like you've never vetted before. I can promise you that's a guarantee.
Yeah, I think another thing that
is to limit the number of investigations and increase the amount of training.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, if you guys run into issues, I think everyone on the panel is pretty much available to have a quick conversation with somebody to help them out who's in the middle of a jam. I know Dale and I do this on a regular basis. Jenny as well. If you reach out to us, in most cases we don't even charge you for a quick discussion on how to protect yourself. Or if you're feeding us a tip of a bad actor and telling us your story, we're not going to sit there and charge you for anything like that. Tell us what's going on. Give us the information, and then let us run with it. Let us figure out what we can do to try to make things better, not just for you, but for the entire industry, because that's who we're here for. We're here for the industry. I don't think any of us does this as their full-time job. I'm a dispatcher. Jenny's a collections agent. Okay, Dale, you're doing this as a full-time thing. Oh, okay.
Finally,
but you used to be a broker.
I got my own business.
You used to be a broker. Jeff, we all own our own businesses. We all have our own daytime jobs that we deal with. This is almost an additional responsibility that we have taken on ourselves because of our passion for the industry. This is why we're here. We're not here for the money.
No. And I can tell you.
The reason I don't charge is because you already paid. By the time you got to me, you probably already paid.
Ain't that the truth?
Hey, I tell you, my passion is in my blood. Logistics is in my blood. 45 years. I still got hair on my head. I don't have any wrinkles. I must be doing something right, and I'm not getting out anytime too soon. If I get into 55 or 60 years, I'll do it because I love this job. It's not a job to me. It's an adventure. I love to go on
I love it too.
and go on hunts every single morning. It's in my blood. When you made it this far, there's no need to bail out. I'd be bored as hell. So
I tell everyone, to
your recent comment, that's in the work.
Pass our information around. If you know us, if you got our information, by Dale. He's like even waving at us.
All right. Thank you, guys.
Dale. Thank you.
For inviting me, Jeff.
Yep. Thanks. So everyone out there, be sure to continue to watch the Storytelling Chronicles for more updates on the Freight Fraud Task Force. Like Dale said, we're going to have some really good guests in the very, very near future. We're going to be putting together committees, and we're going to be out there on the road. We're going to be going all over the place as well. So, you know me, bodacious cowboy. You can't miss it with this little chop here. And I will
So
see
glad
you
to see it
guys
back,
soon.
by the way, Jeff.
What's
So
that?
glad to see that back.
Hey, you know what?
You are more than semi-glorious now. You restored it. I love it.
There you go.
Well, just
All right,
that,
my friend.
people that know us out there, pass our information around, help each other out. We have to
Yes.
rely on each other's resources. So
Absolutely. Thank you, guys. Appreciate you.
thank you.
Have a great day and a great weekend. Thanks.
Thank you.
See ya.
Cool.